The legendary beast, King Storma, sees them and thinks that humans have come again. Bubbles appear at the outer layer of the water, and he contemplates forgiving them last time. However, if they dare disturb his slumber again, he will kill them all. Lloyd Frontera hears someone's voice and looks towards the source, where Bayern is laughing. Bayern exclaims to the little rascals, "Get down, stop it," and repeats "stop," while laughing and expressing that they are killing him with their cuteness. Upon noticing Lloyd Frontera, Bayern gets up and addresses him as his lord, mentioning he has been meaning to ask him about something. Lloyd Frontera acknowledges that Bayern could tell, and Bayern explains that these little ones are the mastodons who were separated from their mothers during the water attack. They seem healthy, so Bayern wants to ask for Lloyd Frontera's permission to raise them. Lloyd Frontera responds, expressing concern that as far as he knows, the bigger they get, the more ferocious they'll become, which could be dangerous. Bayern questions how Lloyd Frontera knows that, but he refuses and insists that it won't be dangerous because they are adorable. Lloyd Frontera explains that raising animals isn't easy and it will be extremely challenging. Bayern continues to deny the difficulty, saying it won't be challenging because they're adorable, pointing towards the mastodons. Meanwhile, he responds with a casual "well, do as he pleases." Bayern lies down again and plays with the mastodons, becoming quite happy. Lloyd Frontera walks away, thinking that Lord Bayern will do a good job with them, and if things go well, perhaps the mastodons could become a great asset for them. He reflects that since there is no guarantee that Operation Guard Dog will work, having even just one more ally, even one more animal on their side, is beneficial. Akush arrives and mentions that the monster Domino might strike their village too. They express regret but explain that they must return to their tribe. Lloyd Frontera thinks it's a shame to lose such a strong ally, but their region is also in danger, and it couldn't be helped. He instructs Officer Greg to gather 5 men and ride with the Sand and Steel tribe. If trouble strikes, they should inform him right away. Officer Greg agrees, and Lloyd thinks that they will be willing to help them for a long, long time. He needs to do everything in his power to keep their army strong. He also reflects that today is the day when the long-awaited operation goes into action. Velarde Blanc informs him that all preparations are complete. He shouts that today they will awaken an ancient beast, and no one but his men can accomplish such a feat. He mentions the superhuman strength required to carve up and dig out mountains, and his warriors become excited. He addresses the white cavalry, asking who can knock a beast out with a shovel when they bare their vicious teeth. He questions them, asking if they believe in the power of the almighty shovel while waving his hand above his head. They all become emotional, wave their hands in a pose of unity, and affirm that they believe the shovel conquers all, waving their shovels high. Meanwhile, they march forward, and Javier comes in front of them as they repeat the chant, "The shovel conquers all," again and again. The system notifies that Javier truly pitied the white cavalry. Through the use of meticulous simulations, they modified the terrain so that the lake banks would crack without causing a flood, and they started working there. Javier stands at the high mountain and declares that he's ready. Lloyd says okay and asks if Javier sees the spot that he marked. Javier confirms and says he sees it. Then he shouts for Lloyd to fire away, and with just the right amount of force, there will be an explosion. Javier stabs his sword into the mountain and uses Mana's blast, breaking the mountain into pieces. The pieces of the mountain go down with full force, breaking trees in their path. Lloyd Frontera thinks that while it won't be an immediate problem if left unattended, it will be just enough to cause the natural dam to collapse. He lies down and orders everyone else to do the same, instructing them to take cover. He believes that now King Storma has awakened, as they all witness his residence mountain breaking into many pieces. Bai Bayong also appears there, and they all look at him. Velarde Blanc finds it adorable, while Lloyd Frontera thinks he could understand everything that Bai Bayong is shouting. He believes that Bai Bayong is angry, just like with Piparong, Bengal, and Hamang. Whenever they speak, he can understand them. Lloyd Frontera thinks that whether Bai Bayong is a summon or whatever he is, it doesn't matter. If he is a beaver, then Lloyd Frontera is even more sure about this, as the most important thing to a beaver is repairing its dams. Bai Bayong moves towards them and says something. Lloyd Frontera thinks he can smell metal and believes that Bai Bayong thought he wouldn't see him hiding there. He tries to look at Bai Bayong, thinking it's like he's attempting to damage his dam to do something. Lloyd Frontera wonders if Bai Bayong really thought he would just fix his dam and go back to sleep. He decides to wipe him out and put an end to his tricks for good, realizing that Bai Beong misread him and botched this. Velarde Blanc crawls towards him and asks what they should do now. He assures Lloyd Frontera that if he gives them the word, they will attack. Velarde Blanc adds not to make that face, as it makes him uncomfortable while making an annoyed expression. In anger, Bai Beong splashes water on them, and they all get up and run back. They float in the water while Javier also jumps in and uses a flare mana blast towards Bai Beong, who splashes water on his fire attack. Javier gets ready to attack him again and thinks he has no choice but to slay him. He jumps to attack him while Lloyd Frontera tells him to wait because he has a plan. Lloyd Frontera thinks that if Bai Beong is a summon, then this will definitely work. Javier attacks Bai Beong and engages him, while Lloyd Frontera secretly approaches him, thinking good job Javier, keep attracting its attention. Bai Beong feels someone's presence, looks behind, and quickly goes underwater, considering that it's extremely sensitive to its surroundings, making it challenging to approach. Javier executes an explosion or a sword behind Bai Beong and escapes from that attack. Javier moves to the back of the lake, thinking that a half-assed attack won't be enough to attract its attention. However, he believes that he'll be able to inflict great damage if he attacks with his full force, contemplating what he should do. Javier shouts Bai Beong's name and Bai Beong responds, asking if he's not his mother, clarifying that he's a male. Javier thinks what a relief that worked. Meanwhile, Bai Beong wonders aloud which part of him resembles a baby octopus and questions why he is suddenly behaving in this manner, emphasizing that he is not that ugly. Lloyd Frontera perches on his head. Bai Beong, addressing Lloyd, questions when he starts sitting on him. Believing he can't be reached due to his short arms, Bai Beong throws Lloyd away, remarking for him to have a tea, thinking it went in, please, and Bai Beong swallows something towards him, thinking it went in. Bai Beong swallows it, expressing satisfaction, saying that's nice. Bai Beong emerges from the water, questioning what is happening and why the world seems to have become so big. He transforms into his real state, but Lloyd Frontera seizes him, proudly claiming that he has caught him. Bai Beong pleads for a moment to be heard, questioning why he is going on a rampage, and then makes a run for it. Urging his soldiers to apprehend Bai Beong, Lloyd Frontera commands get that fellow, as all his soldiers attempt to capture him. Bai Beong exclaims guys, he's counting on him. Pipondong arrives and attempts to intervene, but he is punched, and the assailant remarks on using its fist, questioning if it is a bully in the summoning world. The aggressor notes the fierce temperament and engages in repeated attacks. Humming also shows up, exclaiming frustration at the lack of a fatal hit in their fight. However, Bai Beong quickly steps back, causing Hamming to fall onto Pipondong, who then runs away. Lloyd Frontera arrives, asserting it's not so fast. Bengal leaps in front of Bai Beong, who reflects on King Stroma, a beast born in this land for reasons unknown even to himself. Having spent 500 years simply breathing and sleeping for the first time in his life, King Stroma witnessed the light. Bai Beong gazes at Bengal and blushes. Lloyd Frontera inquires about Mr. Stroma's thoughts and asks if he feels like talking now. Bai Beong responds that if he wants to talk so badly, he guesses he could do that much for him, as he considers himself a gentleman. He thinks the legendary beast, King Stroma, capture is complete and smiles. Meanwhile, at the palace, Bai Beong asks what Lloyd Frontera wants from him. Lloyd Frontera states that his request is simple. Once in the morning and once at night, Bai Beong should yell out his name from across the lake. Bai Beong criticizes him for not knowing the basics of negotiation, stating that when making a request, one should also propose what the requester would gain from it. Lloyd Frontera asks what he can do and asserts that, honestly, he doesn't have anything to give him. However, if Bai Beong did that, everyone there would be much happier. He asks if that needs to be corrected. Bai Beong agrees, saying deal. Lloyd Frontera responds affirmatively, thinking how generous Bai Beong is. He contemplates that Bengal has zero feelings for him despite being of the opposite sex, and decides to give him a nickname, Eternal Bachelor King Storma. He thinks that King Storma may be taken advantage of for life, alone and forever single. He then thinks about Bai Beong and Hug and concludes that they are both single. Bai Beong wonders what Lloyd Frontera is doing, labeling him as a human rascal, and questions what's wrong with him. He thinks about why it feels so warm, and he realizes that Lloyd was able to share his heart with King Storma. Lloyd Frontera asks if he can call him Bai Beong from now on, and Bai Beong responds by saying he can do as he pleases. Just then, Officer Greg enters the room, calling for Master Lloyd Frontera. He questions why he is back if he didn't send him to accompany the tribe of Sand and Steel. Officer Greg explains that they met some of the orc tribes on their way to the estate, and those tribes requested Arash's help. They mentioned that their tribe was under attack by a group of Megalania. Meanwhile, in the tribe of Sand and Steel, Megalania is destroying and attacking everything. An orc warrior reports that they have broken past the third barricade. Akush instructs everyone not to panic and to maintain the formation. He moves to attack the Megalania, but in return, one of them shoots him back and throws him away. Two orc warriors approach him, asking if he is okay. Akush urges them to keep fighting, emphasizing that orcs never retreat. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera instructs the person to tell Sir Blanc to assemble all the white cavalry knights at the village entrance. The person expresses concern that it might be too late for them to go now. Lloyd Frontera reassures him, stating that he will take care of that and urges him to go now. He runs from there, holding Bai Beong's hand with Javier, and emphasizes the need to hurry up, calling it a golden opportunity. The person asks about the opportunity, and Lloyd Frontera reveals it's time for a counterattack to flip over the monster domino. He feeds Bai Beong an almond. The farmer is shocked to see Bai Beong increase in size after eating the almond. Lloyd Frontera and Javier sit on Bai Beong's back, holding him tight as he takes long jumps. Lloyd Frontera encourages him, saying, "Let's go, show his cool side, and steal her heart." They take long jumps, and some workers with shovels come on his back as he jumps repeatedly. On the other side, the orc warriors try to fight against the Megalania. Bai Beong also reaches there. Akush is shocked and asks what this is. Lloyd Frontera instructs him to burn this into his eyes and spread the word that there's no food even if they travel west. They will become the food. Bai Beong attacks them and throws them away, transforming them back to normal size. Bangul arrives there and expresses happiness for him. Bai Beong blushes upon seeing her. Belardi Blanc places his shovel on his shoulder and expresses gratitude for being called there. However, he notes that it seems like they are not needed this time. Lloyd Frontera laughs and reassures him that he would not have reached such precious human resources like him for nothing, as there's another important task for them starting today. Chief Akush comes near Lloyd Frontera, who asks if he is all right. Akush states that they are no longer in a blood pact anymore. Lloyd Frontera asks what he means. All orc warriors gather, showcase their bodies, and declare that he has saved them twice. They, the tribe of Sand and Steel, swear their fealty to the Frontera barony. Lloyd Frontera expresses gratitude and asks if, in that case, they shall start their third project, to resuscitate the tribe of Sand and Steel. Lloyd Frontera explains that a while ago Isfahan, a kingdom bordering the east side of the wilderness, burned down the reed field region for a certain strategic purpose. Subsequently, a huge domino-like movement of monsters followed. Among those monsters, there were some from barbaric tribe societies that possessed intelligence, and they were the ones to witness it happen. He describes how 3 apex predators of the Megalania species were rolled up like wasted paper and sent flying away. Lloyd Frontera continues, mentioning that those sentient monsters began to spread what they saw to the other monsters, and word spread that there's a legendary beast the size of a mountain at the end of the west side. He details that it was so big it could touch the clouds, and its tail was the epitome of a god's wrath, as though a swish could cause a typhoon. Its round black eyes looked like they witnessed nothing but an abyss, and its 2 fangs were capable of eating every living thing in the world. The eyes of the demon that was controlling the beast looked like hell itself. Meanwhile, at Isfahan Palace, a soldier kneels down in front of King Samar Khan and requests him to hear him out. He explains that as per their initial plans, the tribe of Sand and Steel, whose forces have been expanding at a frightening pace, abandoned their settlement and migrated over to Magentano's forest. Samar Khan acknowledges the success of their plans and inquires about Magentano's response. The soldier reports that, strangely enough, the tribe of Sand and Steel was able to arrive in Magentano safely and without any issues. Samar Khan expresses disappointment, stating that he wanted to see the flustered faces of those sly Magentano. He tells the soldier that it's all right, he hears him, and he may stand down now. The soldier seeks forgiveness and adds that one more problem has occurred. He explains that the groups of monsters that they have driven out have returned and are currently attacking their border ramparts. Samar Khan reacts in shock, asking what he just said. He reports that they are using all the firepower they have to repel them. However, they seem to have been driven mad due to fear and are showing no signs of slowing down. Samar Khan orders all the soldiers in the vicinity to gather, attack them with fire, and install an even greater fear in them. He acknowledges and says he will get it done. Samar Khan contemplates that having a monster domino strategy backfires on them and wonders if this is Magentano's scheme. He dismisses the possibility, thinking it should be impossible to repel such a large-scale monster movement unless there's a true devil living in the West. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera moves some papers and says, "Alright, please sign here." Meatloaf asks what kind of document this is. Lloyd Frontera explains that it's written there, and if it needs to be clarified, it's a full debt repayment receipt. He adds that the check he's giving covers all the interest accumulated too. They both start closely checking the check and the contract paper. Meatloaf asks what they are doing and tells them to sign it quickly and get lost. After a while, they leave the room, and Erox Frontera enters. He sees Lloyd Frontera holding a paper and asks if they really paid off that huge debt. Lloyd Frontera shows the full payment receipt and asks if they shall frame this up. He hugs him, gets emotional, and expresses that he has worked so hard to pay off the mistake that his foolish father made. He apologizes for making him go through all this trouble and admits he doesn't know if he deserves to be his father. Lloyd Frontera asks if he loves him. Erox Frontera wonders if he even needs to ask that and affirms that of course he does love him. Lloyd Frontera then questions if that wouldn't be enough to make him his father. The system window notifies him that he has obtained a new title, number 1 at escaping a mountain of debt. It further mentions that the title region is the entire Cremona region. The active period of the title is forever, and CP from Title 2. The notification also states that the title powers he has gained include the highest level of financial credibility, allowing him to receive investment capital at the lowest interest rates with the most favorable terms. After a while, Lloyd Frontera is walking on the town street and Javier comes to him, informing him that the tribe of Sand and Steel has now relocated and settled in the eastern mountain ranges. Lloyd Frontera acknowledges this and says, "Alright, great job." Javier adds that the White Cavalry is assisting in wrapping up the relocation, and Akush is happy that there is tons of food that will help in building muscles. Lloyd Frontera walks away and says, "Alright, he'll take a break too." He reflects that he has managed to move and settle the tribe of Sand and Steel into the eastern mountain ranges. Even if the domino effect comes back for them, they will be able to buy time, and their estate will be safe once he calls for Bai Beong to go on the counter-offensive. He further reflects that since the debt has been fully repaid, he no longer has anything to worry about. He finds it strange that he thought he'd be all excited and jumping all over the place when the debt is repaid, wondering why he is so calm. After a while, he lies down on his bed and recalls a memory of when his father hugged him and cried. He reminisces about his real father, who expressed that Suho is smart and kind, but due to being uneducated and ignorant, he causes him to suffer. His father apologizes, and he becomes emotional, realizing he managed to take care of all the problems here. Overcome with emotion, he apologizes for not being able to help his father in any way. He presses his head against the pillow and continues crying. Javier stands outside his room and hears the sound. He moves from there and thinks he hopes he can cry to his heart's content today because he more than deserves that. The scene shifts to a few days later with people cheering for Master Lloyd Frontera and exclaiming that he is passing through. A person requests him to look over here, and Lloyd Frontera, walking with his shovel held by Javier, expresses annoyance, telling them to stop and go work instead. Despite his protest, people waved their hands and cheered, saying he looked over here, hooray. Lloyd Frontera, frustrated, shouts that he said to stop it, and the people remark that Master Lloyd is getting angry. Javier suggests it's okay to act a little arrogant, but Lloyd Frontera questions why he would do that. Javier points out that all these townspeople wouldn't have been able to smile like that if it were not for him. Lloyd Frontera dismisses it, stating he is only doing all this to earn a living and no one would give him money if he acted arrogant. People persist, asking him to scold them, glare at them one more time, and get angry once more. Bayern arrives in a hurry and informs them of a huge trouble. Lloyd Frontera, showing interest, asks what's wrong. Bayern explains that a large number of people are coming from the south. When Lloyd Frontera asks who they are, Bayern clarifies that he does not know for sure, but according to their security troopers, they seem to be refugees. Nicholas arrives with a group of people and inquires if Lloyd Frontera is perhaps the lord of this estate. Lloyd Frontera clarifies that he is his son and asks who Nicholas is. Nicholas explains that they are townspeople of the Sortino barony, located south of this place, and he is Nicholas, the village chief of the Sorti village within that barony. He further shares that his father was the village chief until recently, and while his father tried to protect the barony with the lord till the end, he passed away. Nicholas describes that it all happened quickly. Lloyd Frontera pauses and asks for clarification on what happened, questioning if it was related to monsters. Nicholas confirms, mentioning 2-meter-tall beetles or monsters that looked similar, and several hundred of them swarmed like bees. Javier interjects, noting that it's the monster Domino, realizing the affected area is much larger than they originally thought. Lloyd Frontera reflects on the news he heard about the estates near the wilderness being affected, realizing that the Frontera barony and the Lacona Viscounty were likely the only places not significantly impacted. He considers that normal estates lacking a substantial summon, a white chivalry, or a sword master would struggle to accommodate refugees. Contemplating their options, he reasons that the sea lies to the north, a different country to the south, and Cremo in the west is too distant. The central area becomes their last resort. He wonders about the number of refugees, whether 1,000 or 10,000. All the townspeople kneel down, and Nicholas requests Lloyd Frontera to show kindness to them, even if it's just providing a piece of bread for their children. Javier remarks that he believes the refugees will likely gravitate towards their estate, but he emphasizes the impracticality of accommodating them all due to space constraints. Lloyd Frontera responds positively, expressing enthusiasm about the situation. He inquires about Javier's thoughts. Lloyd Frontera questions the rationality behind Javier's considerations in such circumstances and urges him to contemplate the matter more deeply. He prompts Javier to consider the potential increase in tax revenue if these refugees become part of their estate, which leads Javier to question if Lloyd sees these distressed individuals merely as a source of income. Lloyd Frontera instructs Sir Bayern to assign a portion of their engineers to cooking duties and prepare food for the refugees, to which Sir Bayern agrees. The townspeople express gratitude. Lloyd Frontera indicates his intention to depart and mentions he needs to report the situation to the Baron. Bayern advises Javier not to become too angry. He asserts that what Javier has just said is excessive. In Bayern's opinion, while Master Lloyd might possess the ability to read others like a book, he genuinely does not comprehend what he wants. Bayern believes it would be prudent to observe what Master Lloyd will do for a while longer before getting upset, if necessary. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera sits with the Erox Frontera and predicts the arrival of more refugees. He inquires about the appropriate course of action and expresses doubt regarding their financial capacity to care for all of them. Lloyd Frontera questions whether he wants to take them in. He acknowledges the imperative to assist those in need, but points out that, with their current food stock, they won't last for more than a few days. Lloyd Frontera questions what he is talking about and asserts that they should have enough resources to feed them all for the time being. After a while, there were tons of wingless locusts. Lloyd Frontera stands in front of them with his parents and states that they have preserved all these to use as compost in the future. They also have tons of them in nearby storage. Erox Frontera is shocked to see this and comments that feeding locusts to people is a bit unusual. Merbella Frontera sits down, picks up a locust and starts eating. He is surprised to witness this. She mentions that they taste somewhat like prawns, asserting that they shouldn't pose a problem since orc warriors consume them without issues. She acknowledges the slightly gamey smell and suggests addressing it. She asks Lloyd Frontera if he can leave it to her to instruct the cooks. He replies, of course, that's precisely why he brought her here. Meanwhile, the orc warriors establish camps for refugees. Lloyd Frontera and Vaillardi Blanc arrive at the site, with Vaillardi Blanc reporting the completion of the initial round of temporary tents. Lloyd Frontera urges a prompt supply of ingredients, emphasizing the need for a substantial quantity. Michael signals with a white flag, informing that approximately 100 refugees are approaching from the north. Expressing surprise at the speed of their arrival, Lloyd Frontera urges quick action to avoid potential freezing. P. Podong responds by striking the floor. Bayern issues instructions for the heating system production team to proceed and calls on the cementing team to assist Dame Bangol in 3 shifts. Bangol employs her powers, and Bayern organizes 2 teams in the south and 3 teams in the north, alerting them to the imminent arrival of refugees. Simultaneously, in the kitchen, Lloyd Frontera stands holding a book before a group of servants, announcing their intention to transform the locusts into highly nutritious dishes. A lady raises a concern about the strong, gamey smell and seeks guidance on managing it. Lloyd reveals that the ancient and legendary recipe book in her possession was written by a dragon chef, detailing the secret she discovered when becoming the Dragon King chef. She discloses that Lloyd acquired the book after defeating the Dark Sorcerer, leaving the servants in awe of the legendary nature of the recipe book. A lady expresses excitement, mentioning the book's reputation for helping its readers create delicious meals with simple ingredients. Another lady adds that it also contains entertaining jokes, enhancing the reader's immersion during perusal. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera sits atop the mountain, observing the camp and the collaborative efforts of people assisting each other. Contemplating the limited space, he ponders the possibility of expanding the living quarters towards the northern mountain. However, he doubts that such an expansion would be sufficient. While acknowledging their current ability to survive, he grapples with the uncertainty of long-term solutions. Amidst his thoughts, the cry of a child reaches him. In the camp, Rudy embraces his mother, shedding tears as he expresses a longing to return home. His mother, however, informs him that they no longer have a home and emphasizes gratitude for the kind people who have taken them in. Rudy persists in his desire to return to the house his father built, but his mother apologizes and assures him that they will rebuild someday. Lloyd Frontera reminisces about his real-world house, reflecting on the joyous moment when they initially unpacked their belongings after moving in. Both his father and mother wore smiles of happiness during that time. Lloyd acknowledges the constant mention of their house in their conversations and laments that he can no longer witness those smiles. Despite it being a modest and shabby house on the outskirts, it held a special place for him, brimming with the happiest moments of his life. Determined, he reassures those around him not to worry, assuring them that he will have a house again soon because he is present. Just then, Javier comes up behind him. Lloyd looks at him and mentions that they are on the brink of undertaking their most extensive construction project to date. Javier inquires if there is a way to accommodate everyone, to which Lloyd responds affirmatively, stating that there will be more than enough space for that. Placing his shovel on his shoulder, he declares their intention to construct apartments. He reflects that apartments are a common type of building seen in South Korea, and considering their estate's current circumstances, this type of building would be the most effective solution. He recognizes the potential to gain significantly more living spaces with a small amount of land, and managing administration would be simplified as everything would be in one area. He acknowledges that the cost and effort required for construction are reduced through standardization, and having units in all directions optimizes insulation. Utilizing his simulation skills, he contemplates that the final and greatest advantage lies in providing refugees with an environment where they can support themselves. This, in turn, would result in a concentration of population, increased purchasing power, the formation of a business district, and an upsurge in tax revenue. Considering this endeavor as his last job, he envisions stopping work and relishing life to the fullest thereafter. He perceives this as fulfilling humanity's long-cherished desire, transforming into a rich, unemployed individual. Contemplating the management of the estate, he dismisses the idea, deciding to provide Sir Baron with a substantial amount of money to handle it. He is confident that if Sir Baron retires, he will successfully groom a proper successor. Feeling dizzy, Sir Baron is supported by two workers as he experiences sudden chills and cold sweats. Michael advises him to rest, acknowledging that he has worked too hard. After a while, Lloyd Frontera gathers a meeting and declares that he will now brief everyone on Frontera Estate's honey apartment construction plan. He emphasizes the importance of paying attention to the documents he has distributed. Javier raises his hand and objects, expressing concern about the name of the building, perceiving it to be filled with ulterior motives. Lloyd advises Javier not to speak unnecessarily in the middle of the meeting and insists on maintaining order. Javier argues that his opinion on the project is justified and requests permission to speak. Lloyd instructs him to wait for permission and questions why he keeps interrupting the meeting. Observing Sir Baron's appearance, he inquires about his well-being. Sir Baron explains that he has been having the same dream for a few consecutive days, involving a slave-driving devil making him work until he dies of old age. Lloyd reassures him, stating that such a thing won't happen, and directs everyone to focus on the first document. He introduces Chilu, an old building design found in Fujian, a place in the east, highlighting its simple bedroom and living room configuration passed down through each generation. He explains that in the middle, there would be a plaza with shared facilities such as wells, canteens, and toilet facilities, and he is going to build them in a square shape. He asserts that building a square is much faster than creating a circle. While there are a few things he wanted to highlight in the documents, he admits to leaving out a significant advantage of this plan. He suggests that if they were to erect a steel gate to block the way of the plaza, this place would become an impregnable fortress instantly. Velarde Blanc applauds for his idea, and he invites questions. Javier raises his hand and poses a question regarding the financial aspect. He points out that it is already tough for them to provide enough materials for the tents and asks if he is suggesting to ignore the people due to financial constraints. Javier clarifies that's not what he meant. He insists on a straightforward yes or no, asking if Lloyd is telling him to ignore the people if he is not providing enough funds. Arcos Frontera expresses concern about the money problem. Lloyd Frontera acknowledges the sharpness of the question and is impressed. He reassures them that the production costs of the tent ondol and the continuous provision of food are not a cause for concern. They may assume that they already have enough funds for these aspects. He emphasizes that starting a new business always involves pulling in money if one is to get started. After a while, Lloyd Frontera and Javier are riding on horses. Lloyd Frontera asks if Javier is upset and teases him by claiming that he is upset. Even though he is a knight, the estate's knight is upset and won't even look him in the eyes. Javier does not utter a word. Lloyd Frontera looks at him and honestly admits that he is scared. He questions whether he can really pull off such a huge project if it will collapse, and if he can accommodate everyone. He acknowledges that he will be held responsible since he started it, and the one responsible can't waver or show any signs of weakness. He needs to fulfill those conditions if he wants to have everyone's complete trust. The only person in front of whom he does not have to act tough is Javier. Javier asks if that does not mean that he is nothing more than an emotional trash bin for him. Despite giving a cheap smile that bothers Javier, he contemplates the idea of punching him. After a while, at Lacona Viscounty, Lacona Mansion, Diego walks sadly in the corridor and notices Lloyd Frontera and Javier coming from the opposite side. Lloyd Frontera waves his hand and expresses that it's nice to see him. Diego screams upon noticing them, getting scared. He questions how they could go when they haven't met in so long and fears getting kicked out of school. Diego becomes even more scared and covers his face. Lloyd Frontera places his hand on Diego's shoulder and reassures him that there's no need to fear. He adds that he is here to help him return to the academy, though the success of that would depend on how his father acts, said with a hint of anger. After a while, Lloyd Frontera sits with Viscount Lacona. He inquires about the potential increase in the price of water. Viscount Lacona is asked if he is using difficult-to-understand words, clarifying that he is essentially asking for more money for water. Lloyd Frontera, internally expressing disdain for the Viscount, perceives him as the scum of the earth. Not only did he profit handsomely from selling water, resulting in his son getting expelled from school, but now he also wants to raise the prices. He starts laughing, stands up from his sofa, moves toward the window, and asserts that the Viscount may not understand how things work due to his youthfulness. He points out that the contract clearly states a fixed price for water. Lloyd Frontera takes out a magnifying glass from his jacket and shows the contract paper. He points to the fine print, indicating that the water price mentioned above is subject to change depending on how the supplier feels. Viscount Lacona screams and accuses him of being a conman. He claims that someone is attacking him, and he's on the verge of dying. In response, Viscount Lacona grabs his collar. Lloyd Frontera calmly urges him to settle down, emphasizing their neighborly ties and the assurance that he wouldn't irrationally raise prices. He asserts that this exchange would be mutually beneficial. However, Lloyd Frontera becomes visibly angered. Lloyd Frontera proceeds to outline 2 key points. Firstly, he mentions the destruction of 70 estates due to the monster domino effect, resulting in a surge of refugees to his side. Despite the influx, he rejected them all, highlighting that if he hadn't, it would have disappointed their queen. Viscount Lacona contemplates this and realizes that sparing him is the intended profit. Secondly, Lloyd Frontera expresses genuine concern for Viscount Lacona and states that he must convey something important, and if he writes a letter to Her Majesty, there might be a chance for Diego to return to the academy. He is filled with anger and demands to know how much more he needs to give. Lloyd Frontera, holding his head, questions why he is behaving in such a manner, emphasizing that he is not attempting to extort money like a gangster. He expresses the hope that Viscount Locona will provide a little more money without causing any misunderstandings, ensuring their friendship remains intact. Viscount Locona contemplates the request, thinking that he needs to specify the amount. Meanwhile, Javier stands nearby, listening to the conversation and forming the opinion that Lloyd Frontera possesses a rather unpleasant personality. Lloyd Frontera politely requests Viscount Locona not to feel pressured and inquires about the percentage by which he can increase the price. He assures Viscount Locona that he will be grateful regardless of the decided amount. After contemplating for a while, Viscount Locona hesitates with his words and suggests a 20% increase. Lloyd Frontera's expression changes, and Viscount Locona, feeling uncertain, quickly revises it to 30%. Lloyd Frontera, now showing signs of frustration, bites his lower lip. Viscount Locona, feeling pressured, looks at Javier, who signals him with his fingers. Finally, Viscount Locona shouts that he will increase it by 50%. Lloyd Frontera, displaying another strange expression, makes Viscount wonder why. He queries Javier, confirming whether he instructed him to propose a 50% increase. Javier affirms by showing his fingers and indicating 5 times. In response, he exclaims that a 5-fold increase is outrageous and labels it as daylight robbery. Lloyd questions why he perceives it as 5 times, asserting that a 4-fold increase is sufficient. Upon receiving confirmation, he proceeds to stamp the contract paper. After a while, Lloyd Frontera and Javier emerge from the mansion, walking on the road happily. Viscount Locona sits in his room, closely examining the contract paper. On the other side, Lloyd Frontera asks Javier why he appears so gloomy. Javier responds, stating he feels like a blackmailer. Lloyd Frontera corrects him, asserting that's not how he should express it. He chuckles, emphasizing that he shouldn't feel as though he is on the verge of becoming a blackmailer. He has already become one. He inquires whether Javier assisted him or not, asserting that Javier is now an accomplice and undeniably a blackmailer. Javier gives him a strange expression, declaring that protecting him is the extent of his duties and he will never again assist him in fraud or serve as his construction tool. In response, Lloyd Frontera mentions that in that case, he won't sing him that lullaby anymore. Javier points out that it has been months since he became a sword master, and he can now control all his senses perfectly, rendering lullabies unnecessary. After a while, Javier lies down on his bed and attempts to sleep. He then takes his pillow and approaches Lloyd Frontera, asking him to sing that lullaby. Lloyd Frontera declines, stating it's too troublesome. Javier persists, requesting assistance. He queries whether Lloyd Frontera has heard of sleep hygiene, explaining that it involves establishing a specific routine for sleeping. Once a habit is formed, his body won't be able to sleep without following certain steps. Javier emphasizes his understanding and urges Lloyd Frontera to sing the lullaby. Relenting, Lloyd Frontera sings for him, after which Javier sits on a chair and falls asleep. He relaxes his hands, stating, "All right, if he shall begin today's tasks." He arranges some papers on the table, utilizes his power, and creates sketches for apartments. Reflecting on his luck in knowing how to build ondolls, he acknowledges a lack of knowledge on constructing apartments and contemplates his next steps. The message box inquires if he plans to try out all the simulations while building it. He affirms, stating that he intends to use another skill to assist, and his level for attempting until it works is at the maximum level, expressing confidence in his abilities. The scene transitions to the next morning. Lloyd Frontera walks alongside Velarde Blanc and instructs him to send a message to Cremo, doctors, stonemasons, and carpenters, asking them to mobilize as many as possible. He directs the continuation of the supply of cement materials and the purchase of as much grain and meat as the estate in the West can afford. Presenting a simulation of the apartment, he mentions having 300 refugees this time, stating that taking in any more would be acceptable and they'll figure it out somehow. After some time in his room, he attempts to sketch something with magical power, contemplating the issue at hand. He wonders if the problem lies in the weight and ponders whether he needs to reduce the number of levels. Experiencing nosebleeds, he dismisses the idea, determined not to decrease the level of his honey apartment. His thoughts shift to resident stability, an active economy, and an increase in tax revenue. After a while, he stands with Sir Bayern, placing his shovel on his shoulder. Bayern states, based on calculations, that the only thing they will be able to afford in 4 months' time is the soldiers' overtime pay. He emphasizes the need to scale down the plan to something more realistic or to send part of the refugees to other estates. He reassures Bayern not to worry, asserting that he will ensure ample funding. Bayern is shocked to hear this. Just then, Lloyd Frontera falls down and loses consciousness. All of them are shocked and rush to pick him up, pleading for him to wake up. The scene shifts to the royal capital, Magenta. Queen Alicia Termina Magentano is on the fighting ground, surrounded by soldiers holding crossbows. She grasps her sword and prepares for battle. The chief soldier gives the order to attack, and they all release arrows. She utilizes her sword with a magical aura, breaking all the arrows before they can harm her. Everyone is shocked to witness this. She reflects on her only noticeable improvement being the ability to create aura faster, deeming it pathetic. Recalling Kyle's past attack on her, she resolves not to allow herself to be humiliated like that again. Suddenly, a servant arrives and summons her. She inquires about the matter. The servant informs her that an envoy from the Frontera barony is seeking an audience with her. She wonders if Lloyd Frontera sent that envoy and proceeds to the palace. Javier kneels there, holding a letter, and begins to read. The letter requests Her Majesty to hack this lowly and incapable vassal of hers to pieces. She contemplates the unexpected nature of the message and wonders what trick the sly fellow, Lloyd Frontera, is up to again. Javier is reaching out to the Queen's court, expressing gratitude for Her Majesty's wise judgment. Together, they manage to barely protect their estate. Unfortunately, in line with the message sent by the White Cavalry, the refugees from the 17 estates have lost their living spaces and are all heading towards the Frontera barony. Javier asserts that, in alignment with the mindset of their esteemed empress, who sympathizes with the commoners, he, as a loyal vassal, deems it right to take in and care for the pitiful commoners of their great kingdom. Taking it upon himself to act in accordance with his strong conviction, Javier reads a letter from Lloyd Frontera. Acknowledging an abundance of greats in his statement, he expresses his intention to support the commoners of their great empress. Meanwhile, she wonders if he is being sarcastic. Javier explains that Lloyd Frontera becomes emotional and reveals that, unfortunately, he does not have enough money. She thinks this revelation surprised him, finding it shameless, but she had already suspected he might do this. In fact, she had contemplated sending funds and supplies beforehand. Javier mentions that they'll need approximately 3 times more than what Her Majesty has in mind. She questions why 3 times, thinking he must be out of his mind. Javier reassures her that he is not crazy. She finds this infuriating and decides she will definitely use the aura flick on him the next time she sees him. He informs her of his plan to build unprecedented multi-story residential buildings in the Magenta Kingdom and shows her the blueprint. He explains that he does not intend to construct temporary buildings to accommodate and feed the people, as his plan involves them settling down and earning a living independently. He is confident that this aligns with what their great empress would desire. Lloyd Frontera, however, maintains that he does not have enough money. She commands him to stop reading any further, expressing an understanding of what he's trying to convey. She instructs him to relay to Lloyd Frontera that, despite being the empress, she cannot haphazardly allocate large sums of money. She emphasizes the need for input from financial experts and the approval of the obstinate elder council. She asserts that bothering Lloyd Frontera any further will not be beneficial. Javier places that letter on the ground, retrieves another from his pocket, and begins reading. He assures that there wouldn't be any issues with the planned buildings, emphasizing their dual function as a fortress in case the monster domino returns or their eastern enemies attack. He contends that these structures will play a significant role as an invincible shield safeguarding the peace of their kingdom. He envisions constructing a fortress city to defend their eastern borders against potential adversaries. He asserts that everyone who has endorsed this plan will undoubtedly find themselves in a much better position within the kingdom. She reflects on the idea, concluding that there don't seem to be any drawbacks to having a fortress city. Rough calculations suggest the possibility of forming a business district the size of Cremo. She acknowledges the need to strengthen the loyalty of all supporters, recognizing that it will undoubtedly enhance his power. The benefits, she believes, far outweigh the required monetary investment. Javier exclaims bingo just as she asks what he's doing. He responds that he doesn't know either, explaining that the letter instructed him to shout bingo in 5 seconds. She addresses Javier as Rahan, assuring him that the funds will be provided and asks for his patience. She pledges to persuade the remaining individuals. Javier, speaking to himself, expresses the hope that Corjidus will come to their estate, considering it would be truly great. She responds with an exasperated all right, telling him she understands and to stop it. After some time at the construction site, Officer Greg asserts that he won't tolerate anyone slacking off just because Master Lloyd is currently resting. The soldier concurs and reflects on Officer Greg's transformation. Initially perceived as a lazy soldier, Officer Greg consistently participated in extremely dangerous missions and handled difficult and meticulous tasks. The soldier believes Officer Greg took on additional responsibilities, exerted his best effort, and ultimately evolved into a true man. This, he concludes, is the essence of Officer Greg's character. Officer Greg declines a request, stating they have sufficient blankets, and suggests passing them on to the elderly or children. He exits the tent, notices Emily, calls her over, and questions why she isn't adhering to the designated break times, noting that he has been working since morning. She retorts, telling him to mind his own business, and asserts that she will take a break if she needs to. He responds by instructing her to hand it over. She firmly refuses, prompting him to run after her. Meanwhile, an orc warrior arrives with some flowers and experiences heartbreak upon seeing her happily engaged with another person. His friends mock him, stating that he loves a female human, considering orcs as morons but labeling him an even bigger moron. They assert that there's no way a female human would be interested in an orc's ugly face and disgusting muscles, deeming him uglier than average. In frustration, he throws the flowers on the ground and comments on Emily's slow pace before walking away. Emily observes him and recalls her last encounter with the orc warrior. On the other side, Lloyd Frontera opens his eyes and mentions that he had a dream, while the system notifies him, startling him. The system asks about the dream he experienced. Lloyd Frontera dismisses it as just a dream, one that feels ridiculous. Bayern sits nearby and inquires if Master Lloyd is awake and if he is all right. Lloyd Frontera responds, stating that he thinks it's almost time. Bayern questions why he is saying that, to which Lloyd Frontera clarifies that he means the day is approaching when they have to pay salaries. He expresses concern that his money will be gone and his balance will soon become zero. He coughs, prompting Bayern to quickly get up and approach him. Bayern suggests they could delay the payment a little, and he is confident that everyone will understand. Lloyd Frontera vehemently rejects the idea, stating that it mustn't happen. He emphasizes that they worked hard, looking forward to payday, and asserts that delaying it is not an option. He declares that he would rather die than do that and closes his eyes again. Bayern is alarmed and calls out to Lloyd while running to fetch the doctor, urging them to get the doctor quickly. Javier arrives at the scene and observes Lloyd, informing others that Master Lloyd Frontera has fainted. Javier adds that he has returned with the money, urging Lloyd to wake up quickly as he takes out money from his bag. The system notifies Javier about a special skill, Financial Heal, and he promptly stands up from the bed, expressing excitement and suggesting they go dig some land. The system further notifies that funds have been obtained to develop Frontera Barony into a city from the kingdom. Bayern reports that Honey Apartment Building 101 is 70% complete, encouraging everyone to hang in there, and they all agree. Lloyd Frontera employs his skill to assess the building's resilience against natural disasters like landslides and typhoons, finding it still intact. He decides it's time for the final test and uses his full force to check against a meteor from outer space. The system interrupts, asking about the nature of this test. Lloyd Frontera responds, expressing excitement, and proceeds to throw a meteor onto the building, laughing. Javier looks at him, questioning why he is being observed like that. Javier comments that he definitely did not think he was a crazy individual. He retorts, confirming that Javier indeed thought of him as such. Javier then informs that Corjidus and the 30 dwarf artisans under him have arrived. He responds with appreciation, thinking about the significance of cement in determining an apartment's durability. He reflects on the complexity and detail required for constructing an apartment, unlike simpler structures such as roads or suspension bridges, emphasizing that a random approach won't suffice. Meanwhile, he proceeds to meet Corjidus and his 30 dwarves, offering greetings. He contemplates that what they currently require is a concrete mixer truck and proceeds to show them the blueprint structure of the mixer. He considers this equipment crucial in the apartment construction project as it prevents the cement from hardening or breaking apart. Corjidus, however, criticizes him as an ill-mannered fellow, questioning if he seriously expects someone who has traveled a long way to work immediately without even offering a bowl of soup. He responds by stating that he did consider how to welcome Corgetus and thought extensively about it, concluding that the best welcome would be a blueprint that he has never seen before. Corgetus acknowledges the idea but questions whether he really needs to smile like a con man. Corgetus adds that he has prepared a proper workplace and proceeds forward, while Lloyd Frontera bows and agrees, stating of course. He thinks that, finally, the long-awaited construction is beginning. He starts digging and instructs him to blast it up, contemplating the foundation work and the operation of the Pipodong-driven concrete mixer truck. Pipodong runs in the wheel of the mixer truck to mix the cement, while orc warriors fold iron rods. He contemplates the preparation of rebar, or the casting filling of cement, stating that he can't pour it all in at once. He advises starting at the edges, pouring where the rebars are connected, and ensuring there isn't any air in it. As the difficulty increases, they plan to use the life-sized crane, Bai Beang, to transport a tray of cement boxes and tiles to the top of the building. He thinks of encouragement and calls Bangle over. When Bai Beang looks at him, she blushes and becomes happy. Lloyd Frontera stands there with Bayern and expresses confidence in him to complete the task. Bayern replies not a problem. He thinks that since they have become familiar with other tasks, he should start working on the problem of insulation for heating facilities. He contemplates that Honey Apartment's heating system relies on a coal-driven steam kiln, and the central heating room will boil water and discharge steam through pipes. He considers that, after traveling through the pipes, the steam will be released in various places connected to radiators to heat up the rooms. The problem, he notes, is that the higher the levels, the more heat they lose, with the 8th floor experiencing almost zero heating. He reflects on having tried all available insulating materials in simulations, all of which failed. Spending nights researching the issue, he wonders if it's possible to create better insulation materials, and if the novel contains any useful information that could assist in solving the problem. After a while, he sits in his room and writes something, thinking this is the chapter where Javier fought a dragon. He observes the dragon roaring, questioning how a mere and weak human could dare to fight with him. He wonders why every fantasy story contains lines implying human inadequacy. Despite being a sword master, he considers that Javier is still too weak to fight a dragon. Javier takes the full blast of the dragon's breath and remains unfazed as the dragon throws fire on him. This resilience is attributed to Javier wearing armor made from the hardened sap of the Alencia tree, considered the strongest insulating material in this world. They both notice the Alencia tree and move forward. Javier remarks that it's been 2 days since they set out and inquires about how far they are going to get the insulating material. Lloyd Frontera responds that they are heading to the Everglow forest, where the elves live, to extract the Alencia tree's sap. He then asks Javier about his destination. Javier asks if he doesn't know that elves hate humans and are a race that's impossible to negotiate with. Despite being the one who flirted with an elf and received a piece of armor in the novel, he responds, saying all right, go back by herself, then escort Knight. Javier notes that elves are a race that no one has approached in 500 years and questions how he intends to persuade them. He further inquires about what persuading them means, leading to repeated back and forth questioning. He declares that there might be a mistake, stating that he doesn't engage in persuading others. Instead, he plans to steal from them. This revelation prompts Javier to express a desire to beat him to death. Lloyd Frontera and Javier walk into the Everglow forest, and Lloyd mentions that in a few more steps they'll be in the Everglow forest, connected to the elves' forest by a nerve network, so they need to be quiet. Javier sneezes due to little fairy plants touching his nose. Lloyd asks what he just did, and Javier responds, asking if he is a fool and if Lloyd knows what a sneeze is. Lloyd replies that of course he knows, but he's asking why Javier is acting all cool when he's just sneezing, claiming it's a misunderstanding. Javier retorts, stating that everything he does looks cool because he has a handsome face, something Lloyd may never understand. Lloyd thinks to himself, realizing that Javier truly meant what he said. The system notifies Lloyd of a sense of shame with damage plus 99 and laughs. Lloyd thinks to himself to shut up and that he'll really kill Javier. Meanwhile, he asks if he isn't a sword master, and if a sword master can't hold in a sneeze. Javier replies that it's impossible to control certain physiological phenomena. He responds that he can't hold in his bodily functions forever, to which Javier replies, questioning why he would do something that could cause constipation. He taunts that a sword master is so lame that he can't even hold in his bodily functions and laughs. He becomes angry and repeatedly punches Javier, who manages to block all the punches. The system notified that Javier was genuinely happy. He instructs Javier to hold in his sneeze and be quiet. Javier responds, requesting him to be quiet. He explains that they need to reach the center of the forest, where the Alencia tree is nearby, just as a group of elves arrive and point arrows at them. He becomes scared and questions how they realized they were there so quickly. Muera exclaims why the hell wouldn't they realize after he made such a big fuss at the entrance. What an idiot. Javier acknowledges that the situation isn't good. He refuses to comply, stating that things have just progressed faster. An elf announces that they'll fire in 3, counting down and shooting fire arrows at them. In response, they attempt to escape the attacks, and Javier skillfully cuts the arrows with his sword. Muera observes that Javier is a sword master, while Lloyd Frontera runs to evade the arrows. He suggests splitting up as planned and rendezvousing at the Alencia tree in 30 minutes, noting that he'll be easily visible from a high spot. Javier expresses concern, asking if he'll be all right alone. Lloyd Frontera reassures him, stating that he'll be fine as long as he attracts their attention. An elf comments that the ugly man is just a distraction, instructing others to chase after the handsome man. The elves run to attack Javier, who counterattacks in response. Elves jump easily from plants, moving here and there, while Javier contemplates that there isn't much information about elves, but it seems Master Lloyd is right this time as well. He recalls Lloyd Frontera's explanation that elves love plants and use a special type of footwork because they don't want to harm plants. He realizes that it wouldn't be right to attack these innocent elves, so the best course of action is to run as fast as they can while avoiding the attacks. They should be able to do that by leveraging the elves' love for plants. The elves attack him from all sides, and Javier attempts to escape, finding it challenging to dodge the attacks, even though they only come from 2 directions. He tries to hide behind a rock, realizing that they are intentionally driving him somewhere. Lloyd Frontera reaches the Alencia tree, activating his upgraded energizer. He thinks that with this upgrade, he won't get tired for 20 minutes. He starts digging quickly, going underground. Javier looks at him and finds it strange, while Miria thinks she doesn't see the captain who was at the forefront just now. Javier runs towards him and thinks not to tell him that she went to Master Lloyd. He runs quickly into the water, realizing there aren't any plants here that he can use to stop their attacks. He swiftly stabs his sword in the water, effectively blocking all their arrows. Miria asks about the extraordinary power, and another elf remarks that the human could kill them if he really wanted to, instructing everyone to calm down. She points out that while the humans might have a sword master, they have Melika. Javier looks around, trying to understand why they have stopped attacking. A giant elf, Melika, arrives, placing her bow on the ground and aiming her arrow towards Javier. The system notifies him about the dragon hunter bow dragon sniper, and she throws her arrow toward Javier, who attempts to block it with his sword. Javier attempts to block the arrow, finding it challenging, and maneuvers behind while continuing to block. He marvels at the incredible strength, realizing that she is overpowering his aura sword with just arrows and raw strength. Reflecting on Master Lloyd's warning that harming even one elf could lead to all the elves seeking revenge, he acknowledges their killing abilities surpass the orcs. Javier concludes that it's time for him to join forces with Master Lloyd. Contemplating that some elves might have gone after Master Lloyd, he wonders about actions he can take to help Master Lloyd without harming any elves. As arrows rain down towards him, he shouts and utilizes all his powers to block every arrow. Melika throws another arrow at him, and he blocks it, sending it back with his powers. Melika throws yet another arrow, and this time, both arrows block each other. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera gathers Alencia tree roots from underground, contemplating that he'll take one more that's around this size. An elf warrior appears from behind, pointing an arrow towards him, and accusing him of being a devil for cutting the roots of precious plants. Lloyd Frontera calmly replies, requesting their understanding, as he also has many lives depending on him. Miria shouts at him not to move, warning that he'll be pierced full of holes if he does. Lloyd Frontera responds that they can shoot him if they want to, but he'll burn them up slowly. He holds a pot containing a baby plant that sobs, identified by the system as a mandragora he picked along the way. Observing this, they become worried, while he smiles and suggests that if they don't want it to be in pain, they should move backward. They express disbelief, questioning if he's even human, calling him despicable trash and a filthy villain. Lloyd Frontera casually replies, acknowledging their words as compliments, and instructs them to start moving backward now. Miria shouts that he is an ugly freak who isn't popular with women, finding him annoying. She points her fire stick toward Mandragora and orders everyone to move backward, and they comply. One of them suggests calming down, stating that this is the end, and proposing to talk now. Lloyd Frontera becomes irritated, eats Mandragora's leaf, and screams for them to just kill him instead. He feels bad because of his saliva and instructs them to go up and climb up. They agree, saying all right, they are going up. Mandragora tells him to stop doing that and abuses him. They exit the hole, and he also emerges while still holding the leaf in his mouth. He thinks that now that he's outside, Javier should be able to spot him easily, and he should be here now if the other elves see him doing this crazy thing first. An arrow comes from behind, hitting the pot of Mandragora, causing it to fall. Lloyd Frontera believes it's game over for him, but he still holds its leaf in his mouth, preventing it from falling. His saliva covers half of Mandragora's body, irritating it. Miera asks what's wrong, while another elf mentions feeling queasy and lightheaded due to getting nervous just now, witnessing such a horrifying sight. Miria shouts for everyone to hang in there, emphasizing that they mustn't show weakness to a plant murderer like him. She then hears growling sounds from her belly, falls down and mentions feeling unwell inside. Her two partner elves hold her, and one of them encourages her to pull herself together. Lloyd Frontera wonders what's happening and recalls that the elf's eyes looked hollow. He notes the absence of any sounds of birds chirping or animals in such a thick forest, not spotting even a rabbit or an elk. He considers the possibility of the monster domino being present. He observes that all the monsters have moved to the end of the mountain range, leaving the middle Everglow forest empty, and concludes that elves will never harm plants in any way. He contemplates that this indicates elves are strictly carnivorous and wonders how long they have been starving. On the other side, elves continue to attack Javier, and he finds it strange that, with their physical abilities, they shouldn't be this tired already. However, he believes that right now it should be possible for him to force his way through them. Using his mana powers to attack, he thinks here he goes, while Melika throws another arrow towards him. He worries about Master Lloyd's whereabouts and hopes he is safe, even as he gets injured. Javier runs quickly to save himself, while the squad leader shouts that he has broken past their encirclement, instructing her subordinates to go after him. However, her subordinates are tired, and some fall onto the branches of a tree. One of them informs the squad leader that they can't go on anymore, and another elf mentions being too hungry to move. Frustrated, the squad leader calls Melika, stating that she is the kind-hearted Melika who shares her own portion of meat. Not only that, Melika has decided to fight to the end while continuing to engage with Javier. She pushes him back and attempts to stab him with a giant arrow, but he manages to escape in time, causing her arrow to hit the rock. Javier thinks about the person he needs to protect, his lord's son, while Melika attacks him again, throwing him away. The squad leader instructs everyone to squeeze out every last bit of strength they have and orders them to support Melika with their arrows. Meanwhile, Javier searches for the savior of their barony, determined to protect him. The squad leader describes him as a monster, and Nuera mentions the footwork that took them 100 years to learn, all while many arrows come toward him. Javier says he needs a little more to move forward. Melika points two arrows together toward him as he notices the Alencia tree and shouts for Master Lloyd, who he sees cooking something. He asks what happened to him and questions if he just fought a war, observing his worse condition. Master Lloyd addresses the elves, stating that some are overcooked, urging them to eat quickly, and others are not cooked yet, emphasizing that pork has to be cooked until crispy. One elf comments that it is tasty, and Master Lloyd looks at Javier, inviting him to come and take a seat. Javier comes and sits with the elves, introducing himself as their escort knight. When Javier replies that he is not a servant, he refuses. Javier informs them that Nuera is the tribe chief, to which Nuera says it's nice to meet him. Javier encourages her to be more friendly in her greetings, asking if she's seriously so unfriendly. Nuera asks if there's space for one more person, and Javier replies affirmatively. Miria calls for Melika to come over while she hides behind a tree. Miria mentions that she's very starved and asks if she can eat all she wants. Javier responds that they can eat whatever is available, but there's not a lot since they are only packed for traveling. He adds that those with their bows drawn will probably be satisfied with just smelling the food. She eats meat and comments that the male elves who do house chores while waiting for female elves to succeed in their hunts must be really hungry. Muera and another elf become emotional, hugging each other and saying, "Darling, don't cry, hold it in." He inquires about the young elves and wonders how long the elderly elves can hold out. He predicts that they'll probably be the first to starve to death, likely the first to return to Mother Nature without anyone knowing, and they'll simply hold back their tears, becoming emotional. All elves hug each other and become emotional while he proposes making a deal. Muera says they don't make deals with mere humans. He laughs, asking what she is talking about, and says they have already made deals, pointing towards the pot of mandragora. He says that when the elves went backward because of hunger, and now she's talking to him because she's hungry and has eaten meat, if these aren't deals, what are they? He says alright, he'll first tell her what he has to offer. It's survival. She asks what's meant by survival. He says unlimited pork meat and coal for her to cook their meat with, and thinks coal is technically made from trees, so they probably won't like the idea of it, but he'll refrain from telling them this, thinking about information asymmetry. He says all she has been eating are jerkies that have dried up, but she'll now be able to eat sizzling juicy pork. He says he'll provide her with a siak bingo that will help her preserve meat and keep it from spoiling. Muera asks what he wants, and he replies he wants to survive as well. If she doesn't agree to this, all the children on their side will also freeze to death helplessly. He states that they only need the sap of Valencia once a month, just a small portion of it. If she gives them that, no one on their side will die. He also mentions that he will tell her how to extract the sap without hurting the tree. Additionally, he suggests that it would be faster for the elves to transport the meat if they split around 100 elves into 2 groups. One group would assist in transporting the meat, and the other would help in building their house. He inquires about her thoughts on this idea that could benefit both sides. Melika responds, advising Chief Muera not to agree. She asserts that humans are always full of lies. Recalling her mother's advice, Melika recounts that her mother once lived in a human place known as Gapel on an exchange with them. Due to their short lifespan, humans try to enjoy life as much as they can, which is why they may become greedy, lie, and commit atrocities. Melika believes that Muera should only trust humans if she believes they can become true friends. Returning to the present, she firmly states her refusal, explaining that she will only make deals with a human who is a genuine friend. Chief Muera realizes that it's a tough obstacle to overcome. Lloyd Frontera contemplates the meaning of friendship, reflecting on his past in the other world where he was consistently alone, filthy, unattractive, and impoverished. He recalls joining the traditional building research club driven by a desire to learn, aware that others were mocking him behind his back. He wonders why he always appears so pathetic, lacking even 3001, and laments that his perpetual financial struggles disrupt the atmosphere. Despite these challenges, he grits his teeth and endures the insults, aiming to acquire more knowledge that will eventually lift him out of poverty. He envisions a future where he can utilize this knowledge to improve his circumstances. The story shifts back to his real-world life, and he sits with a friend at the dining table. The friend advises him not to take what others say to heart, as he has better results and is more active in activities. Kim Suho responds with gratitude, and the friend dismisses the need for thanks, asserting it's just facts. He assures that the food will be a pleasant surprise, praising the restaurant's excellent beef. Lloyd Frontera moves a bite toward his mouth and expresses his thanks. The friend encourages him to eat as much as he wants, highlighting that the only meat he can afford is canned tuna. Lloyd Frontera looks at his friend, recalling the condescending eyes and the disgusting smile, feeling a momentary happiness. He reflects on being perceived as a charitable person for feeding what he metaphorically describes as a filthy dog. He tears up, savoring the deliciousness of the charity received. Acknowledging his friend's kindness, Lloyd Frontera asks if he can eat 2 more portions, to which his friend generously suggests 3 more portions. This marks the beginning of their friendship, as Lloyd Frontera realizes that this guy is a good person. The story returns to the world of Lloyd Frontera, where he contemplates that there's nothing extraordinary about friendship, and he decides to express his appreciation by buying beef for his friend. He retrieves a piece of meat from his bag with a clamp, displaying a sticky expression. Muera observes the meat, noting its different color and strange brilliance. Lloyd Frontera moves the beef piece toward them, and as they eat it, they become emotional. Muera expresses her acceptance of his deal.